That's an interesting moustache, man. Guys are cool.
Oh, sorry, my internet froze. I didn't realise I was on. Right, my question's a little bit personal, so there's a couple of things I need to know about you first, Hamza. So, firstly, do you love Allah?
Yeah, well, I hope so.
Right. Now, were you a convert to Islam, or were you born a Muslim?
I was a convert.
So does that mean that your parents are not Muslims?
That does mean that at the moment, yeah.
Do you love your parents?
I hope so.
Would you love your dad as much if he burned your mum with cigarettes on a daily basis?
My dad? No, I wouldn't.
Right.
I wouldn't.
Okay. So, considering your parents are destined to hell,
you don't really know that yet. But
well, I believe Surah 4:56. Lo, those who disbelieve our revelations, we shall expose them to the fire. As often as their skins are consumed, we shall exchange them for fresh skins, so that they may taste torment again. So Allah's going to burn their skin off repeatedly for eternity.
If they die as disbelievers, yeah.
Yes. So if they die tomorrow, let's work on that hypothesis.
Yes.
So then in Surah 7, verse 50, it says that the dwellers of the fire, the dwellers of hell, will cry out to the dwellers of heaven, pour on us both for the disbelievers. So, considering you'll be in heaven for all eternity, in a place where you can hear the agonizing screams of your parents having their flesh burned off by fire, do you think that you will be able to continue to love Allah? And do you think that he deserves the term the most merciful?
Yes, that was a very sexed up view of the Quran, as usual.
No, there was no sex involved. It was generally a lot of pain.
Yeah, well, let me just...
He was talking about hellfire, not houris.
Let me articulate...
to answer.
Yeah, let me answer, please, guys. First and foremost, in the Quran, the way we view the Quran is in an intra and intertextual sense. What that basically means, the Quran is the book that gives us the methods to interpret the book, okay? So we have ambiguous and non-ambiguous verses, and we relate them together, we could come to an answer. The underlying view is, in Islamic theology, that you go to hell because you put yourself there. That is the reality. So if, for instance, you walk towards a fireplace, you know you're going to get burnt, but you're going to get burnt. That's a result of cause and effect. That's a result of this kind of spiritual, metaphysical cause and effect. And that's how we view it, do you see?
And I have to jump in with this question.
Can I just say something?
One at a time. We'll get to rationalist and then back to Aaron.
You say that if you walk towards a fire and you know you're going to get burnt, well, obviously, if your parents knew they were going to get burnt, they would be Muslims. The very fact that they're not Muslims means that they don't believe it, and therefore they don't believe they're going to get burnt. So, actually, to change your example would be, Allah put a fire in the room, and nobody knows if they're going to get burnt or not, and they're blindly walking towards it, and they don't realise it's going to happen. But the fact is as you said,
that's not true. God says in the Quran,
regardless of that, you did say that your parents will go to hell. So let's
no,
forget
I didn't say that.
Oh, no, you said if they died tomorrow,
to
you said
be fair,
to hell.
one issue at a time.
This is the one issue. The one issue that I want to know is spending eternity in heaven, being able to hear the screams of the people in hell begging for water. Do you think that that person is worthy of love? The person that is, the entity that is torturing those people is worthy of love, especially when you consider that it could be someone that you love, such as your parents.
See, the Quran answers this in the best way. What the Quran says is that the people in hell would not believe and would not say that any injustice has been occurred onto them. So it's a reality that they know they have been accounted for and that they deserve what they get. This is the reality of hell. It's not something
let me clarify that, because there's dangerous ground you're treading on here.
Yeah, probably.
Okay, I have discussed this religious matter with many, many, many different people of many different faiths, and a lot of them are particular religion that you're going to hell. Christians tell me every day that if I don't accept Jesus, then when I die, I'm going to go to hell, which would mean that you are going to hell if the Christians are right because you did not accept Jesus. Conversely, the Christians are going to go to hell if you're right because they are guilty of idolatry. Same thing. It just occurs to me that everybody seems to be going to hell, and that hell, in reality, does not exist, cannot exist, would not exist, is a logical fallacy to even imagine the thing. If God really existed, there wouldn't be a purpose in the hell. The only reason hell exists is because God doesn't. It's a concept that was created to offer the threat of ultimate punishment for those who didn't believe. Throughout your book, throughout your religion, you are punished solely for not being gullible enough to believe this. And why would anybody mandate that? If it was real, if it was sincere and genuine, it would not punish you for not believing. Myself. Because I have heard all these people, and they've all given wrong arguments, and I've proven every one of their arguments wrong. I'm not able to believe what they cannot substantiate or agree upon, because we have all these different religions, all believing different things. They all contradict each other violently. So why would I believe them? So I'm going to die, right? And I'm going to find myself in hell unforgiven because I wasn't gullible enough to believe the one guy out of 100 that happened to have been right in the lunacy that he had as opposed to the lunacy everybody else had. How could I be punished for that for any amount of time, much less for an eternity?
I think this goes back to what we were talking about earlier, Hamza.
Yep.
How do we know that your God is the right one and not another God?
Okay. Well, first and foremost, in the Islamic theology, we don't believe God just punishes you blindly. God says that He...
I'm sorry, Hamza.
Yeah.
Please.
I need to address that question.
It's a direct question. How do we know that your God is the real one and not other gods? Please answer that question.
Yeah, for me, there's various reasons, because I believe that the Quran is a expression of God, and one of the reasons for that is that it is a literary miracle, and I could discuss that for you if you want.
Well, I would like to see you try it. It's the most surgical book I've ever read. Sorry, Aaron.
All right, just for a moment. I mean, God says in the Bhagavad Gita that there are some people that argue for the existence of evolution. And indeed, he's quoting from Anaximander, and roughly 600 BC or so. How could Anaximander have figured out evolution? How could he have figured out the geocentric solar system? How could his associates, Democritus, have figured out the existence of the atom? Maybe their atheism was correct. You want to talk about an inimitable work of literature. Look at the Bhagavad Gita. It doesn't just talk about one world. It doesn't have one world being manufactured for 4 days and then the rest of the universe being splittered out of a single sneeze.
Before you do, Almighty, I'm going to come to you a second because you have been very patient and quiet.
And it is much older than the Quran.
Yeah,
it's the oldest religion there is.
If we may, I would like to concentrate on the question. That is to say, how do we know that your God is the right God? Now, so far, you have given one reason, namely that you think the way in which the Quran is written is justification. Let's not go into the pros and cons of that argument. That's one reason. What is the other reason?
I'm sorry, can I quickly interject?
Please,
this won't be the addition of a new point. This just builds on. This won't be the addition of a new point. This is just another example of what I think Aaron was trying to demonstrate. Okay. Last Magic Sandwich show, we had a Christian personality named Venevang X on the show, and Aaron laid out many of the things. We don't think of them as scientific miracles because we're atheists, but observations about the world that are in concurrence with modern science that are in the Bhagavad Gita. And Sean replied by saying that he believed that both the Bhagavad Gita and the Bible both had supernatural origins, but believed that the Bible was written by God and the Bhagavad Gita was written by demons. So he was essentially conceding that the demons were able to write the better, more accurate book. And I'm wondering, how does this fit in with the Quran? If there are other books that are more accurate in their observations. And let me be clear, I do accept your argument that the Quran was not sent to perform a function as a science textbook. If an angel or an alien or some being with much greater knowledge than a mortal man were to visit one of us, we would have many different questions for them, and it would be their prerogative not to answer if they have a schedule to keep. So, granted, the book was meant for a specific purpose, and I'm not expecting it necessarily to go ad nauseum, covering every single field of science and predicting all future history. The only problem we have with scientific claims in the Quran and other religious texts is, if it's written by beings of great or even infinite wisdom, then even if it mentions a scientific fact in passing, it stands to reason that it would always be accurate. So I hope I haven't put too much more on the plate. I hope I just
and all I was pointing out was exactly what you had mentioned. In addition to the fact that in the case of the Bhagavad Gita, it is God speaking. Now, his name is Krishna, as opposed to Christ, as opposed to Allah, as opposed to Yahweh. Okay, so it's a different name, but it's still God, and it's still an assumption that it was God who wrote this book, or it was actually God talking. These are stories. They're written by men. It wasn't God says, unless it's just a story.
Sorry. And I know that a lot of things have now just been thrown at you, Hamza, but I'm terribly sorry. I do think it's a fair question, and I want to concentrate on this question. How do we know your God is the right one and not another? And at the moment, you have come up with the fact that you think that the Quran is written in a particular way that supports it. Now, let's not go into the details of that. I just want to know what other arguments you would seek to advance that you've actually made the right decision in your selection of a God.
Sure. See, first and foremost, if I've given you a summary of the argument why I believe the Quran is from the divine, then I should be allowed to elaborate on it rather than for it to be dismissed.
Please. We've all gone on very long, so we'll give you plenty of time.
Yeah, I've been dying to put this argument in for quite a while. Okay, first and foremost, the Quran in the second chapter, and I'm going to say in English, basically says if you doubt this book, then bring one chapter like it. Now, a lot of the Quranic exegetes, they mention that this has to do with the linguistic and literary features of the Quran and the nature of the Quran. For example, we have Arab historians like Ibn Rashid who said that, the Arabs at the time of revelation were the best at expressing themselves in the Arabic language. Now, in the Arabic language, when we study the Arabic language, the classical Arabic language, every time you express yourself, you fall into certain literary forms. I'm not talking about rhetoric here. I'm not talking about subjective, do I like it? It sounds nice. It's not about eloquence. I'm saying about forms. And the forms we have are prose and poetry. And prose is split into two further forms. And if you read the Orientalist Devin J. Stewart, he elaborates on this. We have mursal, which is straightforward speech, and rhyme prose. Now, the alternative to that is the poetry. And the poetry has 16 to 17 rhythmical patterns. And those rhythmical patterns are rhythms based on syllables. Now, the argument is that the Quran, its expression lies outside any literary form known in the Arabic language. And the challenge is, use the finite grammatical rules, the finite words and the finite letters of Arabic language, exhaust them, and try and replicate the Quranic form. To this day, no one has been able to replicate the Quranic form. So from a philosophical perspective, the Quran lies outside the productive capacity of the nature of the Arabic language, which is the Islamic definition of a miracle. It's not the old Western view of whatever breaks natural law, because natural laws are just inductive generalizations of patterns we perceive in the universe. We don't agree with that. A miracle for us would be a logical impossibility. We exhaust the possible naturalistic explanations. So for us, it's an indicator to the supernatural. It's a signpost to the supernatural. A good website on this is theinimitablequran.com. I know it's good because I wrote it. No, I'm only kidding. But yeah, so check that site.
I have read it. Almighty, did you want to come back on that?
Yeah, look, I know a thing or two about languages, and I find the test for the miraculous to be unspeakably absurd, frankly. Whether it's the arbitrary aesthetic quality of people judging it, whether it's a certain pattern, whether it's a certain kind of prose, the very note that could only have been done with divine with the aid of some divine agent is just a complete non sequitur. If someone makes the best omelet I've ever eaten, I don't assume that an angel helped them make the omelet. If someone sings a very beautiful song, I don't automatically assume that a jinn has given them vocal lessons of any kind. It just doesn't follow.
Sorry, a what? A jinn made it?
A jinn, yes.
Genie.
What's that?
A genie.
Yes,
But-
a jinn is a singular form of genie.
You've misunderstood the argument here. The argument here is that when you reproduce a song, it's still in the form of a song. We know songs have certain rhythms, they have certain patterns, they have a scope of rhythm and form. And we know the line when a song becomes now a poem, and when a poem becomes normal speech. This is well observed facts if we study language and linguistics. The Quran transcends any known form of the Arabic language. This is an impossibility, and this challenge has not only...
Sorry, it wasn't an impossibility, first of all, because it happened, and second of all, having a new and unique style, good for him. But again, that's not in any way, shape, or form evidence of a divine agent.
No.
If it was divinely written, it would be clearer than this.
No,
and we
well,
wouldn't have to have mystical codes like the Da Vinci Code and other sorts of, every religion talks about how their holy book is the only one that possesses these numeric codes, these types of songs, or this type of verse. They're all making this essentially the same claims to their own divinity, and they're all as ambiguous as can possibly be. But when you have a half a dozen different people, all of whom have mutually exclusive, completely conflicting opinions, and all of them threaten you with damnation if you don't believe them, tell me, honestly, which is the better course? You roll a dice to figure out which of these guys you're going to believe? Is belief even a choice? Or would it be wiser instead not to be fooled and to withhold judgment? Do not allow, actually commit that any of them are right. Would that not be wiser in order to avoid deception? That is the only thing you could do.